Hello again, folks. Thanks for coming back to the Electric Channel by DJ DH. That's me, of course. And it's now 2:39 in the afternoon on Saturday, the 26th of July. And I want to talk about there's a preponderance of the use of Section 50 by the Police Reform Act 2002. Recently, excuse me, I have a bit of a throat. Recently, over the last 2 years, there is this uptake in Section 50. It used to be Section 44 of the Terrorism Act, but the police used it over and over again until there were so many complaints, it was actually removed from their use. So they tended then to move to Section 43 of the Terrorism Act, where police would stop a cameraman, for instance, and say, "Oh, we think you're in overt." Sorry, I've had a stroke and my mind sometimes goes. So, overt looking at things in the case of seeing if they can introduce terrorism. Okay, sorry, the word will come back to me in a few moments. So on the June 21st, 2025, so just a month ago, a street preacher who's been a street preacher for over a quarter of a century, and he's a former miner, asked a question at an open stall, and the stall was focusing on supporting ethnic minorities, the victims of ethnic minorities in domestic violence. The question asked by the preacher was how the lady reconciled her work helping abuse victims with Surah 434 from the Quran, which he claims, and I know it's true, permits husbands to discipline their wives. They can hit them with a stick. It's only a small stick, but they can hit them with it, as long as it doesn't leave permanent marks. So he contrasted, the preacher that is, he contrasted this with the Christian teachings about husbands sacrificing themselves for their spouses before he walked away. The Muslim woman, yes, she was a Muslim woman, she flagged down a police constable, I think there's 2 or 3 of them, and reporting that she felt threatened by the street preacher, his name's Steele, Mr. Steele, and the police camera footage captured the evangelist holding a placard when they found him, featuring a biblical verse calling for repentance. Now, the officers responding to the complaint informed Mr. Steele that his conduct constituted antisocial behaviour. Body-worn cameras by the police constables showed the preacher laughing incredulously while declaring the world's gone mad and insisting he'd merely posed a straightforward question. They used Section 50 of the Police Reform Act 2002 that grants police constables the authority to require individuals suspected of antisocial behaviour to provide their name and address. Now, this is something new, 2002, so it's 23 years old, but we have a right to be safe in our identities. We shouldn't have to give our identities to anybody who asks, including the police, unless you're guilty of a crime. But they're saying that his actions constituted antisocial behaviour. How do they know? On the word of one woman that he asked a question and she felt harassed, alarmed and stressed by the question. Well, if you can't answer the question, you might feel, I feel stressed, but that's not a crime. But the police use Section 50 to identify him. Now, the key provisions, I'll explain the key provisions I've got it written down, and I did know it anyway, but I've got it written down. So I'll tell you. The key provisions of Section 50 is the authority to demand information. The constable in uniform may require a person to provide their name and address if they have reason to believe that that individual has been acting or is acting in an antisocial manner. This is defined as behaviour likely to cause harassment, alarm and distress to others. Now, I don't see how it can be a law, because how do you define what causes harassment, alarm and distress to others? What distresses me may not distress you, and the other way around. What distresses you, I think, well, it's never bothered me. So it's a stupid law, and it should be unimposable. But I can't envisage how asking a question could be construed as causing harassment, alarm and distress to others, but it seems to be an increasing tactic of Muslims to get the upper hand, and for the police, in course of their duties, in order to enact dominance over members of the public, as they're doing under those non-crime hate crime mandates that they're using. Public freedom is at risk of being removed from us. That's my belief, and I think it's the belief of many others as well. Now of this Section 50, the consequence of non-compliance, because they can demand your name and address. So what happens if you're non-compliant? If a person fails to provide their name and address when requested, or if they provide false information, they can be guilty of an offence. So now you've got an accusation, you cause distress, you cause stress and alarm and harassment. Now, if you don't give your name and address, you're now guilty of offence. See how it works? This can lead to a fine or arrest under the standard provisions of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1984. Now, the limitations of use: the police must have reasonable belief that the individual is currently engaged in antisocial behaviour. They cannot use this power as a blanket authority to question everyone, maybe in a crowd, without specific suspicion against only the individual that they see or have been pointed out to them. Antisocial behaviour. Now, we're getting deeper, aren't we? Because they have to see that they've got reasonable belief that the person, the individual, is currently engaged in antisocial behaviour. So, antisocial behaviour definition. The term antisocial behaviour is further defined in the Crime and Disorder Act 1998, which includes actions that cause harassment, alarm or distress to others. This definition is crucial in understanding the application of Section 50, which they're using. Now, you see how it goes round? Nothing has been proven. A person says, he asked me a question, it caused me stress. Well, that's Section 50. Now, under Section 50, we've got to go to the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, which is PACE, 84, and we've got to have reasonable belief under PACE that they did so. But we've got that reasonable position because you told me it caused you stress. What's the legal protections for the accused? The individuals have the right to ask the police under what authority they're being questioned, and can refuse to provide the information if they do not believe the police have reasonable grounds for their request. So the preacher, did he ask, what are your reasonable grounds? He laughed it off. He said, "Well, what's the world coming to ask a question, and I'm accused of breaking the law." Now, recently there was a cameraman, and the cameraman, he was refused the right to ask the police under what authority they were questioning him. So we've just heard you have the right to ask why, what are you being, what the reasonable grounds of their request for your name and address. Now, the cameraman asked what authority. He asked the question. And what happened is, under this section, Police Reform Act 2002. The significance is in the context of the policing and community safety, as it provides law enforcement with tools to address antisocial behaviour. What antisocial behaviour was the preacher doing? What was the antisocial behaviour of a cameraman taking a photograph of a police car? In these cases, there was no antisocial behaviour. Taking a photograph of a police car is in no way antisocial. He was arrested. It was a blatant misuse of the legislation. Now, the cameraman, he was arrested last year under Section 50 for not disclosing his name and address to police officers who confronted him, and he was confronted by several constables and a custody sergeant who excused himself as he was going to be the one who they would take him to. Arrested for filming police cars. Now, this, as I've said before, this activity is perfectly legal, and in fact the Chief Police Officers Association sent a letter out to all the police stations stating it was legal. But many police refused to accept the letter, and it has not been disseminated to the troops, the police constables, to get around it by those who do know. They utilise Section 50 by claiming the action of photography in public was causing harassment, alarm and distress. In the case of the photographer, he was arrested, taken to the police station. Well, he was outside the police station, taken to that custody sergeant who took his DNA and his fingerprints under Section 50, and then he was referred to the Crown Prosecution, who refused to pursue the case because it was illegitimate. Now, the photographer, he took out a complaint of unlawful arrest under Section 50 and the unlawful identification of a law-abiding citizen. This was last year, and until now his complaint has not been reviewed and no response has been received. It was just a blatant exercise in depriving a member of the public of their freedom to feel safe in their identity. A blatant ruse to bring in George Orwell's 1984 tactics. I recommend you read George Orwell's novel 1984 because it is becoming a reality. I promise you it's becoming a reality. Freedom is being taken away from us, and most of the public are asleep. They're sleepwalking into a communist Sharia law nightmare. Think of the people arrested for simply standing quietly near an abortion centre, bothering no one, or the lady arrested for holding up a sign stating, "Here to talk if you want." What harassment, what alarm, what stress is "here to talk if you want"? What alarm, what stress, what harassment is standing quietly, not speaking to anyone near an abortion centre? Do you know over 70 people a day are visited by the police in the early hours of the morning, knocking on their door, standing on their doorstep, to advise them they've been given a non-hate crime record? And many more will never know until they apply for a new job and the prospective employer does a DBS background check on them and finds they've got a record. It's not a criminal record, no, it's a non-crime record, but it's registered by the police as a non-crime. How can you be registered by the police for non-crime? Because they're allowed to by our government, they're allowed to by the law, and it is totally wrong, and it's been slipped in, as has this Section 50, to remove our rights of freedom, our rights of expression, our rights of free speech, our rights to feel safe in our own identity, our rights to keep our address, our name, and our date of birth private to ourselves, unless we wish to give it for an organisation that actually does require it. Police do not require these things, but they have the right. They've been given the right to take our name and address under Section 50. It's devastating freedom. It's devastating to right-minded people. And as I say, the public are sleepwalking into a communist Sharia law nightmare. Your comments welcome, your views welcome, your subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you a penny, not even a cent, not even a rupee. It's totally free to subscribe. So subscribe to the channel and make your comments known. This is how we will fight against the loss of our rights to speak out. Make your comments known. So until the next post I will send to you very, very soon. Be safe, be good, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye for now. Bye.